Tonight on CFTK-TV News, Kitimat is in the midst of trying to expand itself. Some indigenous talking sticks have finally made it all the way back home, and the local airport is close to finishing up some renovations.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Baslett, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. The Terrace RCMP recently released some more information about a case that they did briefly bring up before in their weekly report covering most of mid to late September. Back on September 26 at around 3:30 in the morning, both the RCMP and Terrace Fire Department responded to a report that said multiple vehicles located on the 5000 block of Pulley Avenue were on fire. 4 total vehicles and even some nearby buildings were damaged by the fire, in a case where the police believe the incident to be an arson incident. The police do have some evidence that leads them to believe that it was possibly a pair of people that were responsible for the fires, and anyone with useful information that could lead to their discovery is asked to call the Terrace RCMP at 250-638-7400. The indigenous talking sticks that the mayor of Terrace was en route to return have now officially reached their home. The mayor and his family were welcomed to the Dzawadeniwa First Nation in Kingcome Inlet this week, where they participated in a ceremony in which the sticks were welcomed back and danced in, followed by speeches at a feast. Mayor Boutosh said that these sticks seemed to take on more presence in the big house, surrounded by other carved pieces and their people, and that he could sense that the sticks were back home where they belonged. Pictured in the image are Knowledge Keeper Marianne Nicholson and Mayor Sean Boutosh. Yesterday, the Terrace RCMP were observing a driver by a parked truck interacting with a man who is a known drug user. The truck then drove away, and the RCMP conducted a traffic stop at the intersection of Monroe and Lizelle Street. The officer on scene discovered drug paraphernalia, weapons, as well as a knife and bear spray. The man was then arrested for possession of a weapon with a dangerous purpose. He was chartered for more firearm offenses and was later released with a court date. We currently await the rest of the results of the investigation from the RCMP. And in another separate case, the RCMP found a driver in another pickup truck swerving, braking, and accelerating in the Terrace area. After being pulled over, there were boxes of ammunition, empty beer cans, and drug paraphernalia on the front seat. They also found 2 rifles and a shotgun in the back seat. Kitimat is looking to expand their town with LNG Canada in hopes of helping out their local economy. Here is CFTK's Damian Smith.
Once again, CFTK caught up with the mayor of Kitimat, Phil Germuth, about local economic development, including updates on the plant's flare with how it will be situated going forward.
So, of course, LNG Canada is now in the commissioning of the plant. Basically, almost all the construction is done, so now they're commissioning, which is why we see the flare. So the flare will be there for at least a year, and it started off pretty small, and it'll get bigger and bigger as they go through. Of course, the LNG themselves, I mean, when you see the flare on, that's money going out the pipe, right? You're burning $1,000 bills. They would like to keep it as small as possible, and of course, to safely commission a gas plant, you have to have the flare.
Germuth and LNG Canada are hoping to have their first shipment of LNG off of the West Coast in 2025. And he also touched upon the economic benefits for the Haisla Nation from LNG.
And the Haisla really business savvy, having a deal where they would actually have a percentage of the pipeline capacity, like brilliant. Very smart thing to do, and that's for decades and decades is going to give them, a real great economic benefits to the Haisla Nation. And of course, there'll be training and jobs for them, so we're so proud to see that for them. That's a great idea.
Now, Phase 2 of LNG is a work in progress at the moment, but new developments will be made within the next 5 years. Locally, Germuth is hoping this massive project can help Kitimat create more opportunities for local business owners.
Unfortunately, as being a small business owner myself, you have to realize that there's just not enough population here that would support a lot of businesses full time. So yeah, we'd love to see some of those. We're hoping for with Cedar LNG, hopefully second phase of LNG Canada, and any other opportunity. We'd love to get the population back up a bit to where it makes sense and it's realistic for entrepreneurs to go out and start a business.
From CFTK, I'm Damian Smith.
The new Terrace and Kitimat Regional Airport's renovations are nearing completion, and here's CFTK's Jayleen Matthews this time with more on those renovations.
frequent flyers from the Terrace-Kitimat Airport can get excited for some new changes, as starting Monday you'll be collecting bags inside the newly renovated terminal.
Today we are about to open up the long-awaited arrivals addition or completion to the terminal building.
The new conveyor belt is longer, allowing significantly more space for passengers while grabbing bags.
We've added approximately 2,000 square feet of space onto the terminal building to allow for more space for people to come in and when they arrive off the aircraft to get their luggage. As you can see behind me is a larger baggage belt. Gives a lot more access to people so they're not crowding around tiny little space.
Constructed by Technicon, the terminal also features a new awning for protection from the elements.
Terminal building, you'll see that there is an overhang over top of the arrivals sidewalk that'll help keep people dry when they're coming back from the warm climates in their sandals and their shorts in the wintertime. And that should be open shortly.
Hendry did say to expect some prices will go up, including parking prices. Hendry says all of the renovations are expected to be completed within the next 6 weeks. For CFTK News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
Coming up next, we have an updated look at the polls not too long before the BC election. Welcome back. Just a little over 2 weeks before voting day in BC, NDP leader David Eby released his party's platform with plenty of spending and promises. Because of his NDP support is stalling and the Conservatives are taking the lead in a new poll. More on that now from Penny Daflos.
How to reach voters and convince them the NDP should continue to run the province isn't easy. But the New Democrats are counting on this action plan to convince voters that with their priorities and a bunch of election goodies, they deserve another shot in government.
We're transparent about the numbers.
A whopping $1.6 billion in new promises on top of policies they've already announced. How did you decide what would make it in and what your priorities would be for this platform?
This platform was developed for British Columbians, to respond to the very specific concerns we're hearing from people about affordability, with the middle class tax cut, around healthcare. How are we going to ensure that those emergency rooms are open right across the province? What are the specific things that we're going to do? What is our plan to tackle that issue? How are we going to ensure that everyone gets a family doctor?
On the housing front, they're promising to increase the speculation tax, get rid of no pet clauses in purpose-built rental buildings, and bring in subsidized insurance for mom and pop landlords. The senior supplement would go up by $100 per month, and they want to slap drivers of high-end cars with speeding tickets based on the value of the car. Changes to transit, policing, and liquor enforcement are on the table, as is expanding West Coast Express service to Chilliwack while adding a mental health counselor to each school. There were also plenty of attacks in the platform and at the podium.
When John Rustad and the BC Liberals were elected, they cut taxes for the wealthiest people, and they raised costs for everybody else and cut services that people depended on.
As for the deficit nearing $10 billion this year alone, Eby is optimistic resource prices, the film sector, and the overall global economy will bounce back.
The commitment is that we're going to get back to balance over time. We're going to have declining deficits over time to get us back to balance.
Great, and that's a wrap. Thanks, everybody.
As mentioned before, new polling suggests that the BC Conservatives are now in the driver's seat as they steadily gain momentum. But most voters still appear to prefer Eby over Rustad. CTV's Kevin Chirac takes a closer look at the numbers.
Right now, it's all in the hands of the Conservatives.
A new Leger poll shows the BC Conservatives in pole position, jumping from 42 to 46% with decided voters, while the NDP is hovering around 43% and the BC Greens sitting at 10%. The BC Conservatives getting an unexpected bump from women and younger voters.
Typically, parties that are considered to be right-wing parties don't do well in those categories.
Young people are feeling increasingly of the view that they won't be able to afford a house ever, and that's got them quite concerned.
While the Conservative wave appears to be rising, there's uncertainty behind its party's leader. Just 38% said he'd make the best fit as premier, with Eby at 45%, and Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau at 16%.
From the polls, it's still not absolutely clear that British Columbians know who Rustad is.
We took that question to the streets.
Do you know who John Rustad is?
Yes, the leader of the Conservative Party.
I certainly do. He was in the Liberal Party.
No, who is he? I've seen his pictures. I don't really know him.
We have an instance where the party seems to be more popular than the leader, which you don't often see in election tracking.
And while some people we spoke with were ready to cast their ballot,
The NDP party.
Do you know who you're voting for?
Yes, I do.
And who's that?
Well, I'm not going to say.
others are on the fence.
I'm undecided.
Undecided.
And they're not alone. 9% of those surveyed were undecided, representing more than enough potential votes to swing an election. Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Vancouver.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad also rolled out a bunch of campaign promises targeting drivers, transportation, and small businesses. CTV's Rob Buffum has the word on that.
Driving down the cost of car insurance is a priority, says BC Conservative leader John Rustad, pledging to eliminate ICBC's monopoly.
We're going to introduce competition, the ability for competition to ICBC, make sure that there is fair and proper insurance available for people here in British Columbia.
Rustad says he'd keep the no-fault scheme for minor injuries, making up 85% of claims, but ditch it for serious life-threatening ones. NDP leader David Eby says Rustad's plan, implemented in other parts of Canada, would actually cost young drivers more.
This is a direct threat to affordability for you. John Rustad knows it. The numbers are obvious. You can look at the other provinces and compare.
Transportation was a major theme for the BC Conservatives on Thursday, the party rolling out a slew of promises, including a new bridge to Kelowna, expanding Highway 1 to 6 lanes to Chilliwack, expanding the Patella Bridge to 6 lanes ASAP, no to bridge and road tolls, and fully funding TransLink for 2 years. Other commitments include replacing the George Massey Tunnel faster than scheduled, extending SkyTrain to Newton and Surrey. For businesses in BC's fastest growing city, it sounds good, but the devil's in the details.
It's great to see that these items that will impact Surrey and our business community regionally are part of this platform. However, until we see the finances, the budgets, the actual details, we still remain skeptical.
When it comes to budgeting and business, Rustad also unveiled plans to help struggling small businesses, reducing red tape by 25%, creating a Minister of Red Tape Reduction, and reducing small business taxes from 2% to 1%.
Businesses across this province have identified the cost of doing business as one of the impediments to them not just surviving but thriving. Is a positive step. It's a recognition that small businesses are struggling under the cost of doing business.
Rustad says he'll release his full platform soon with school and childcare plans in the next couple days.
Turning to tonight's weather, the North Coast is expecting to have more rain at a low at 10 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area should be home to a chance of showers, as well as a low at 7 degrees, and the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District will be greeted with a chance of showers of their own, plus a low down at 2 degrees. On the North Coast, the next week or so will be made up of entirely rain, plus the high will shift from 13 to 11 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them will also see pretty much only rain and clouds, while the high moves from 11 to 10 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the upcoming week will, like the other areas, be covered in rain and clouds too, as their high jumps between 13 and 11 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is bridge maintenance, other maintenance, utility work, construction work, shoulder maintenance, and paving operations. Highway 37 has some bridge maintenance, utility work, slippery sections, and roadside brushing. And there is some construction work, maintenance, and flooding on the Nishka Highway. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, based on a recent warning, it seems as if Israel is set to launch another attack. Welcome back. Israel has issued new evacuation warnings for parts of southern Lebanon. It's a signal that its invasion targeting Hezbollah is expanding. Israeli airstrikes are ongoing as the humanitarian crisis escalates. CTV's Heather Wright has the latest.
Israel hit a building in central Beirut overnight near the country's parliament and a number of Western embassies. Officials say 9 people were killed. In total, 200 Hezbollah targets were struck, 15 fighters killed, according to the IDF. But it's been a deadly day for civilians and health workers as well. The WHO says 28 health workers have been killed in the last 24 hours, along with a Lebanese soldier. The Israeli military has told residents of 20 more towns in southern Lebanon to leave, indicating the IDF could move troops beyond the Litani River, the boundary of a buffer zone established by the UN following the war in 2006 between Israel and Hezbollah. This most recent conflict has killed nearly 2,000 people, according to Lebanon's health ministry, with roughly 1 million now displaced. More than half of those forced from their homes are children.
We're very concerned about their mental health and their well-being. We're witnessing and we're monitoring very closely the situation of children. We're concerned about the long-term impact.
Israel insists its operation in Lebanon will be limited, focused on eliminating Hezbollah tunnels and rocket launching infrastructure that the group has used to target northern Israel for the last year.
They're going to be very precise, very deliberate in how they're going to degrade Hezbollah.
As Israel pushes further north into Lebanon, its leaders weigh their options and how to respond to Iran's unprecedented missile strike.
Does Israel go after the nuclear infrastructure in Iran? Do they attack oil fields in Iran? More than just the military and intelligence facilities that they've targeted in the past.
Today, Canada's Minister of Defense said retaliation by Israel needs to be carefully considered, reiterating the government's position that Israel has the right to defend itself. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
The BC Conservatives have clarified their position on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and this comes after an announcement from earlier this week caused some confusion. As CTV's Ben Milger reports, BC's Assembly of First Nations accuses the Conservatives of divisive fear-mongering.
In Chilliwack on Monday, John Rustad laid out a plan he calls Indigenous Economic Reconciliation.
Laying that foundation for prosperity through economic reconciliation is the path that we believe can unleash the potential for First Nations, and by doing so, unleash the potential of our entire province.
He says his party would honor the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, quote, as it was intended. To some, that sounded like a flip-flop on an earlier promise to repeal DRIPA, the provincial legislation creating a framework for applying on DRIP. Thursday, the party clarified, if elected, it still plans to scrap DRIPA, saying it will replace it with new legislation focused on economic benefits for First Nations. The BC Assembly of First Nations says DRIPA is about more than economics.
Sovereignty and self-determination of UNDRIP is really what we're seeking to resolve some of the outstanding long issues with the Crown and also with colonization.
Chief Terry Teague also accuses Rustad of using DRIPA and a title agreement with the Haida Nation as wedges to sow division.
Title on Haida Gwaii will now exist underneath your private property, underneath your communities. That also means Haida law will apply to those communities.
He stated that perhaps First Nations will have some sort of veto and or perhaps taking private property away, which is nothing further from the truth.
Earlier this week, a campaign aimed at ending gender-based violence revoked permission for Rustad to wear its pin. In a letter, the Moosehide campaign said elected leaders have a duty to promote respect for Indigenous people, adding it is our position that you are not upholding these standards.
So when the Moosehide campaign started, it started actually with a concept in my riding. I've been supporting it. I provided funding when I was minister. We provided staffing as minister.
Since its inception, the Moosehide campaign has received funding from both BC Liberal and NDP governments. Ben Milger, CTV News, Vancouver.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 21/10 of a cent, the price of gold is down $11.40, oil is up 67 cents, natural gas is down 12 cents, aluminum is up $3. In Toronto, the TSX is up 194.33 points, the Venture Index is up 5.34, in New York, the Dow Jones is up 341.16, and NASDAQ is up 219.37. Still ahead, a Vancouver native is attempting to lead her fellow Canadians to victory in a voting competition. Welcome back. A Vancouver woman will lead a team of Canadians in Europe for what will be a historic moment for women's sailing this weekend. CTV's Ben Nesbitt has more.
Making their final preparations. A group of 5 Canadian women, led by a Vancouverite, are just days away from making history.
It's taken 173 years for the women to finally get our very own America's Cup trophy.
Isabella Berthold will captain Team Canada as they attempt to sail their way to a victory in Barcelona, where 12 women's teams will compete for the very first time.
We've been training for this for the last 2 years now. It feels very odd to train for such a long time just for one race. So the fact that, yeah, we're only a few days away from that very first race it's very exciting now.
The women's event will begin on Sunday. The top teams from each pool will advance and continue to race for a spot in the finals. But Berthold says it's about more than just winning in the water. She says all the teams are hoping to inspire the next generation of women.
We see so many young girls still dropping out of sport before they even turn 18. And a big part of that is they just don't know or see their role models on TV the same way that male athletes do. And they also just have a difficult time seeing how they could ever be a professional athlete.
The races will be broadcast on TSN. Berthold hopes Canadians will tune in to witness history. Ben Nesbitt, CTV News, Vancouver.
The BC Supreme Court won't grant an injunction to stop tree removal in Stanley Park. In a ruling this week, the court dismissed an application to halt the removal of thousands of trees due to a looper moth infestation in the popular park. The legal challenge, filed by a group of 4 park users, argues that the City of Vancouver and its park board were negligent in authorizing the work, saying the park's degradation has caused them stress, anxiety, and sadness. Lawyers for the city and park board conceded that there could be merit to the claims, but the ruling says it's unlikely a trial would find the park users were owed a duty of care, in addition to finding out that there's still time for the board to make a decision about further tree removal and for the public to challenge it. That's all of our news for now. From everyone here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.